Picture this. You are standing exactly 4,000 meters above sea level.
Which is, incredibly high up.
Oh, it's extreme. You are perched on the very edge of this desolate, freezing, snow-capped peak in the middle of literally nowhere.
Right. The environment up there is just completely hostile.
Yeah, the air is so thin it almost hurts to breathe. Like your lungs are just desperately grasping for oxygen.
And you have to imagine the sound, too. The wind would be howling.
Exactly, just battering against the exterior of this massive, brutalist structure. And this is the Zenith Observatory.
It's essentially a fortress of modern science.
A fortress that is completely and intentionally isolated from the rest of the world. And inside the colossal, rotating steel dome of this place sits Dr. Victor Sterling.
The victim of our deep dive today.
Yes, he is a world-renowned astrophysicist, like an absolute titan in his field.
The kind of guy who gets magazine covers dedicated to his genius.
Oh, totally. And he is strapped into this high-tech, custom-built observation chair. It's positioned directly beneath a telescope lens that is so staggeringly large, it looks like the eye of a god just staring out into the void.
It's a very evocative image.
Right. And he is waiting to preview a celestial alignment so rare, it basically won't happen again for another millennium.
So the anticipation in that room must be absolutely palpable.
You can just feel the tension, but then at the exact moment of the alignment, the main generator fails.
Which is the ultimate inciting incident for this whole case.
It really is. In an environment that is already fundamentally hostile to human life, the one critical tether to safety, which is electrical power, is violently severed.
And total pitch-black darkness just swallows the dome.
Yes. And it lasts for exactly 15 seconds. Just 15 seconds.
That's a very specific window of time.
It is. So, okay, let's unpack this, because this is not a ghost story, even though it sounds like one.
No, it's a meticulously documented true crime event.
Right. Today, we are unpacking a mountain of primary source material. We have got our hands on the leaked crime scene photos from the Zenith Observatory.
And the heavily redacted police interrogation transcripts.
Yeah, those are wild. Plus the official coroner's autopsy report and, most intriguingly, the actual recovered code strings that someone used to hack a multi-million-dollar telescope.
Which is just a fascinating technical angle.
It really is. So our mission today is to reverse engineer an impossible locked room murder. We're going to step into the shoes of a crime scene investigator.
A forensic deconstruction, basically.
Exactly. And I want you, listening right now, to walk this grid with us. Because how does a man die a violent, horrific death in a sealed room in complete silence during a 15-second blackout?
It is the kind of scenario that aggressively defies basic logic. I mean, when you look at the architecture of this crime...
And you mean that physically and digitally, right?
Both, absolutely.
Yeah.
It becomes clear very quickly that this isn't just a murder. It is a masterpiece of weaponized physics.
That is a terrifying phrase. Weaponized physics.
But it's true. It's an execution that relies on cold-blooded psychology, incredibly advanced mathematics, and, well, an understanding of human vulnerability that is genuinely chilling.
So we are looking at a crime scene that was purposefully engineered to be a paradox.
Precisely. To confuse and delay any investigation.
Let's go back to those final 15 seconds then, because I want to spend some time here. The environmental context is just everything.
It really sets the stage.
So imagine you are Victor Sterling. You are sitting in the dark waiting for this cosmic wonder. You are completely unaware that you are in the crosshairs of an invisible weapon.
The sensory experience of that blackout is so vital to understanding the mechanics of what happens next.
Yeah, think about the sudden biting drop in temperature as the environmental controls die.
Right, because it's freezing outside.
Exactly. And then the massive rotating steel dome, which weighs, hundreds of tons, it's grinding to a halt.
With this deep, metallic, vibrating groan that you would literally feel in your teeth.
Ugh, yes. And then just utter, oppressive silence.
It's like being trapped inside a giant acoustic and sensory deprivation tank at the top of the world.
That is the perfect analogy, a sensory deprivation tank. Just you, the pitch black dark, and the crushing physical weight of the isolation.
That analogy actually highlights why the isolation of the Zenith Observatory is absolutely crucial from a tactical standpoint.
How so, like tactically speaking?
Well, when you are planning a crime of this magnitude, the environment itself has to be conscripted as an accomplice.
Wow, an accomplice.
Yeah, At 4,000 meters, you are dealing with a hostile alpine environment. There is no accidental interference. Like, no one is just wandering by on a midnight stroll.
Right, there are no tourists up there.
And there's no immediate police response. I mean, the source material notes that it would take authorities a minimum of 4 to 6 hours to navigate those mountain roads in good weather.
Let alone in the middle of the night during a storm.
Exactly, let alone secure the perimeter of a high-tech facility. And most importantly, there is nowhere for a killer to run.
Right, because if you run out into a blizzard at 4,000 meters, I mean, you're dead anyway.
Precisely. The environment itself is part of the trap. It creates this intense psychological pressure cooker.
So the killer knows that whatever happens in that dome stays in that dome until they decide otherwise.
Yes. They essentially engineered a scenario where the authorities are entirely locked out during the critical window and the suspects are entirely locked in.
Which perfectly preserves the crime scene, but it also traps the investigators in this web of contradictory evidence.
It's a brilliant, if utterly ruthless, strategy.
And what happens in that dome is just terrifying. Because 15 seconds later, the emergency uninterruptible power supplies, the UPS systems, they finally kick back on.
The lights flicker back to life.
Yeah, the heavy hum of the backup diesel generators fills the room. And Victor is still sitting right there in his chair.
But he is dead.
He is dead. And this is where the forensic logic of this whole case just completely shatters.
It really does. You start looking at the body like detectives, and the evidence, or more accurately, the total lack of it, is entirely baffling.
Right. The physical state of Victor's remains is deeply unsettling. Looking at the autopsy reports from our sources, the anomaly is just stark.
When the medical examiners look at the body, they find his eyes are wide open.
Yeah, and they are completely clear. Like, no signs of trauma, no burst blood vessels, no burns to the cornea.
Nothing on the lens or the retina either. His face is completely untouched.
But his brain, or rather, his brain has suffered instant, localized, catastrophic heat trauma.
Specifically the frontal lobe. It's just devastating internal damage.
Wait, I have to jump in here and push back on this logic immediately because I am looking at the autopsy report in our sources right now.
Okay, what do you see?
It explicitly says, quote, 0 external burns, epidermis and dermis fully intact.
Right, that's the paradox.
Well, I mean, I am no physicist, but if a laser or a heat source is powerful enough to instantly boil brain tissue and cause massive hemorrhaging, it absolutely has to melt the skull first. Right?
That is the logical assumption, yes.
It has to burn the skin, scorch the hair, and if it went through his eyes, it would just cook the corneas instantly.
Are the forensics wrong here?
No, the forensics are incredibly accurate.
Then are we fundamentally misunderstanding what this weapon even is? Because it makes absolutely no sense.
It is a profound contradiction. And your instinct to challenge the physics is exactly what the police investigators struggled with for weeks.
Because it just defies common sense.
Exactly. In forensic science, we rely on a foundational concept called Locard's exchange principle. Have you come across that in your reading of the sources?
I have, yeah. It's basically the golden rule of forensics, right?
Yeah.
Every contact leaves a trace.
Yes. The killer brings something to the scene and takes something away from it.
Fibers, DNA, fingerprints, that kind of thing. Precisely.
Mm.
But here, the trace completely defies the supposed contact. Let's methodically go through the negative evidence.
Okay, yeah. Because what isn't there is just as important as what is, right?
Exactly. It builds the locked room puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
First, the high-tech security sensors, which run on an independent battery loop, confirm there was absolutely no physical breach of the dome during the blackout.
So no one snuck in or out. The biometric locks on the heavy steel doors remained totally sealed.
Right. Second, a thorough, grid-by-grid physical sweep of the room reveals no weapons of any kind.
No firearms, no blades, no blunt instruments. They didn't even find any hidden explosive charges.
Nothing smuggled in. Not even a high-powered handheld laser.
Nothing. Okay, what's third?
Third is the audio surveillance. That also remained active on the backup battery loop.
And it recorded no sound of a gunshot, no scuffle, no gasps, like no signs of a physical struggle whatsoever.
It was completely silent except for the mechanical winding down of the dome itself. And fourth, returning to your point about a laser, the observatory is heavily equipped with highly sensitive optical and security grids.
Because they have to detect light pollution for the telescope, right?
Exactly, and those sensors detected no coherent laser emissions. 0.
So we have a perfectly sealed room, no breach, no physical weapon, no sound, no laser beams.
And yet, a man's brain is literally fried from the inside out while his skin is perfectly fine.
This raises such a massive question. I mean, it addresses my earlier pushback about the physics.
It really does. If the trauma is definitively from extreme heat, but there is no heat source found,
And no conventional weapon and no breach of the locked room.
then we are forced to rethink our fundamental definition of what a weapon actually is.
We have to stop looking for a gun or a laser pointer.
Exactly. We have to start looking at the environment itself.
But as for the physics of how a brain can boil without the skin burning, I still don't get that.
Well, we need to move away from the idea of a single, highly concentrated laser beam piercing the skull like a bullet.
Okay, if it's not a laser, what is it? Like, how do you bypass the skull entirely?
We have to look at the principles of converging energy and specific wavelengths. The autopsy anomaly is actually the biggest clue we have.
The lack of surface burns.
Yes. Think of it less like a laser and more like an acoustic whispering gallery. Have you ever been to St. Paul's Cathedral in London or maybe Grand Central Station in New York?
Oh, yes. The whispering gallery. You stand in one corner, face the curved wall, and whisper.
And someone standing 50 feet away in the opposite corner can hear you perfectly.
Right, even over all the crowd noise, because the sound waves bounce along the curve of the architecture.
Exactly. They perfectly converge at a specific focal point.
Yeah.
Now, apply that exact same architectural and physical principle to this case.
But replace acoustic sound waves with lethal thermal radiation.
Precisely. If you use a massive, perfectly curved, reflective surface to gather a wide ambient field of near-infrared light.
Light that isn't highly concentrated at its source, you mean?
Right. It reflects off the curved surface as a broad beam. As this wide beam hits the subject's head, the energy is dispersed over a large surface area of the skin and bone.
Oh, I see. So it warms the skin slightly, maybe feels like a hot summer day on your face?
Exactly. But it isn't concentrated enough at the surface to cause cellular damage or burns.
Because it's spread out over the whole face. It hasn't reached its focal point yet.
That is the genius of it. The geometric calculation of the weapon was designed so that the absolute pinpoint convergence of all those overlapping waves of light.
The focal point of our thermal whispering gallery.
Yes, that focal point occurred exactly 3 inches behind Victor's forehead, inside the frontal lobe.
Oh, wow.
The light safely passes through the skin and the bone because human tissue is surprisingly translucent to certain wavelengths of near-infrared light.
Assuming it's not concentrated at the surface layer.
Right. But when thousands of these wide rays intersect at a single microscopic point inside the dense water-rich tissue of the brain,
The localized temperature just spikes instantly.
the tissue boils, causing an immediate fatal aneurysm. It is a silent, invisible execution.
And it leaves the exterior pristine. That is just incredible. That entirely reframes the whole crime scene.
It completely answers the impossible body paradox, doesn't it?
It does. But it also means this wasn't, a crime of passion. You don't just stumble into a perfectly calculated geometric thermal strike.
No, you absolutely do not.
Which brings us to the suspects. Because if nobody came in and nobody went out, the killer was in the room, sitting right next to him.
And according to the police reports, there were only 3 other people in that dome with Victor during those 15 seconds.
Right. 2 international university investors. These are people with incredibly deep pockets who were there to vet the facility.
They were looking to fund the observatory's next major phase.
Yeah. And then there's Clara. Clara is Victor's top research assistant. She knows the observatory inside and out.
When you are dealing with a locked room scenario involving multiple witnesses, the interrogation phase is crucial.
It shifts from a physical hunt for clues to a highly delicate psychological game, doesn't it?
It does. Law enforcement isn't just listening to the story. They are evaluating cognitive load.
Like looking for micro-expressions or baseline deviations in their behavior.
Exactly. And most importantly, narratives that don't align with the established physical reality of the space. You are essentially looking for the lie wrapped inside the truth.
Well, looking at the redacted interrogation transcripts in our sources, Clara's testimony is deeply, deeply unsettling.
How did the investors react during their interviews?
Oh, the investigators interview the 2 investors first, and they are basically useless. They were just terrified.
They experienced the sudden dark, they heard the dome stop, and they panicked, which is a standard human reaction.
Well, right. But Claire's different. When the police interview her, she gives this incredibly vivid, almost poetic account of those 15 seconds of darkness.
What exactly does she say?
She swears to the detectives that she felt a sudden rush of dry heat pass through the freezing air of the dome.
That aligns with the thermal weapon theory.
It does. But more importantly, and this is the part of the transcript that gave me absolute chills, she says she saw a terrifying silent flash of blinding golden light.
A blinding golden light.
Yes, and she explicitly states that she saw it reflect inside the massive glass mirrors of the telescope.
Which is a brilliant, audacious piece of psychological misdirection if you really understand the optics of the environment.
Because it is a physical impossibility. I mean, the lead detective immediately catches the crucial contradiction in her statement.
He realizes the lighting doesn't make sense.
Right. She claims she saw a blinding flash of golden light reflecting off the telescope's massive concave mirrors. Those mirrors are pointed directly up at the sky through the observation slit in the dome.
But the sky was completely dark.
Exactly. The weather reports from that night, which are included in our source stack, confirm the night sky outside was totally dark. It was a heavily clouded night.
A severe alpine storm was rolling in, correct?
Yes. There was no moonlight, no starlight, no lightning, nothing. So where on earth does a blinding golden light come from in a pitch-black room facing a pitch-black sky?
What's fascinating here is the psychological tightrope Clara has chosen to walk during this interrogation.
What do you mean? Like, why tell such an obvious lie?
Well, in the field of deception detection, we know that the most skilled liars, the truly formidable ones, do not fabricate a story out of thin air.
Because that's too hard to keep track of.
Exactly. Fabricating a lie from scratch requires an immense amount of cognitive load. You have to invent details, remember them, and make sure they logically track under pressure.
Which is how most criminals get caught. They trip up on their own fake details.
Right. Instead, experts in deception weave the exact, unvarnished truth into their narrative. But they contextualize it in a way that makes it seem scientifically impossible or easily dismissible to the listener.
Oh, wow. So she's not lying at all. She's telling them exactly what happened.
She is embedding the exact truth of the murder weapon right into the center of her testimony. She felt the heat. She saw the blinding golden light.
She is hiding her confession in plain sight.
Knowing full well that to a standard police detective, it sounds like an optical impossibility. Or maybe a hallucination caused by stress.
She is essentially mocking the investigation. Like, she's daring them to understand the physics of what she just handed them.
Basically saying, I'll tell you exactly how he died, but you aren't smart enough to understand it.
That is incredibly arrogant. But it works, because the detectives initially dismiss it as shock.
Until they dig deeper.
Right. Eventually, they bring in forensic engineers to look into the telescope itself. Because if the light she saw didn't come from the sky, it had to come from inside the room.
And that leads to the biggest revelation of the case.
It does. The engineering report in our sources reveals a piece of technical sabotage so brilliant it genuinely feels like it belongs in a high-budget spy thriller.
The killer didn't bring a weapon in their pocket.
No, they weaponize the architecture of the observatory itself.
Doing so requires a profound, almost instinctual understanding of both complex software architecture and physical optics.
So how did they do it? What did the engineers find?
The engineering analysis uncovers that the automated calibration system, the highly complex proprietary software that controls the telescope's massive concave mirrors, had been maliciously reprogrammed.
So it was a hack.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I want to be clear. This wasn't a brute force hack. Someone didn't just guess a password and smash the keyboard.
It wasn't just breaking into an email account.
Not at all. It was an elegant, surgical alteration of millions of lines of code. It was a ghost in the machine.
Let's break down the actual mechanics of the kill then, because this is where the physics of the sources get extremely granular and, honestly, terrifying.
It really is an incredible feat of engineering.
Let's go back to those 15 seconds of darkness. When the main power dropped, the backup systems triggered, but they didn't just keep the lights off.
Right, they triggered this hacked code.
Yes. The massive mirrors of the telescope, which are suspended above the room, didn't just sit there idly. The code commanded them to flip inward.
They physically rotated on their gimbals to face the interior of the room, rather than looking out at the sky.
And this is the critical pivot in understanding the weapon, isn't it?
Absolutely. Normally, those mirrors are designed to do one specific job, collect incredibly faint, scattered starlight from millions of light years away.
And then meticulously focus it into a single intense point for the optical sensors to read.
Exactly. They are concave, meaning they curve inward like a bowl. They act like a giant, mathematically perfect funnel for photons.
But instead of collecting faint starlight, they were now pointing directly down at the observatory's own ceiling structure.
And what is mounted on the ceiling of this massive dome?
The internal illumination system, specifically the intense high-voltage halogen guide lights.
These aren't normal light bulbs.
No, these are industrial-strength, stadium-level halogen lights used for maintenance and structural inspection when the dome is closed.
So to use our earlier acoustic analogy, the mirrors became the curved walls of the Whispering Gallery.
We are talking about multi-million-dollar, perfectly engineered concave mirrors, suddenly collecting thousands of watts of internal, blinding halogen light.
Creating a giant high-tech solar furnace.
It's like a kid using a magnifying glass to burn a leaf with the sun, but scaled up to a lethal degree.
The precision required here is staggering. When the emergency power kicked in, those halogen lights flared.
And the massive concave mirrors captured all that ambient, scattered, intensely hot light.
They gathered it, mathematically focused it, corralled the photons, and directed them into a single, invisible, microscopic pinpoint of extreme heat. A heat ray.
And because of the hacked calibration coordinates, that focal point was directed precisely down to the exact millimeter onto the forehead of Dr. Victor Sterling.
He was just sitting there in his chair.
Strapped in, waiting for a celestial event in total darkness.
Exactly. And the sheer mathematical genius required to pull this off simply cannot be overstated.
Because there's so many variables at play.
Consider them. The killer had to calculate the exact focal length of the telescope's mirrors. They had to map the exact trajectory of the reflected halogen light.
And they had to account for the ambient temperature drop in the room affecting the density of the air, right? Which slightly alters light refraction.
Yes, and they had to calculate the exact three-dimensional spatial coordinates of a seated man's head in a pitch-black room.
Because if Victor had leaned forward to stretch his back, or tilted his head even a fraction of an inch to whisper to Clara,
the focal point would have missed the frontal lobe entirely.
It might have harmlessly warmed his shoulder or burned a hole in the leather chair behind him, but the code locked onto his expected spatial coordinates perfectly.
It is the ultimate locked room murder. The weapon was light itself, gathered from the environment, focused into a lethal point, and then dissipated.
The moment the mirrors automatically reset to their default positions or the main power returned, the weapon just ceased to exist.
There is no physical weapon to recover, because the weapon was an ephemeral optical phenomenon. It existed for a fraction of a second and then vanished into the ether.
But to build a weapon like that, to understand the acoustics of thermal radiation, to hack the proprietary calibration software of a multi-million-dollar telescope.
You have to know that machine better than anyone else on Earth.
You have to be the person who essentially wrote its mind. You don't just hire a hitman to do this, which really pushes us to look at the motive.
Building a weapon out of light isn't a crime of passion. It takes months, maybe years, of calculations and testing.
That means we aren't looking for a thug. We are looking for a brilliant engineer.
A crime this intricate, this poetic in its methodology is never random. It is deeply, intensely personal.
So the question is, who had the technical capability, the access, and the burning desire to write this code?
And this is where we have to dive into the dark history of the Zenith Observatory.
And the history of astrophysics in general, frankly. We have to look at the man Victor Sterling truly was, behind the accolades in the magazine covers.
Behind the genius facade.
Right. The police investigation digs into his past, and they uncover a name that had been systematically erased from the records.
Marcus.
Yes, Marcus! He was a young prodigy, a brilliant former graduate student of Victor's, and here is the absolute bombshell hidden in the case files.
Marcus is the true author of the revolutionary mirror alignment code.
He wrote the foundational software that made the entire Zenith telescope possible.
This brings us to a very dark, often unspoken reality within high-level academia and competitive scientific fields.
The whole publish or perish culture?
Exactly. In astrophysics, where billion-dollar grants and international prestige are on the line, intellectual property is the ultimate currency.
And the system is just ripe for exploitation.
We've seen historical examples of this power dynamic. Think of Rosalind Franklin's uncredited contributions to the discovery of the DNA double helix.
Right, because the power imbalance between a tenured, world-famous titan like Victor and a young, unknown graduate student like Marcus is absolute.
And Victor's sins were profound. The sources show a trail of emails and suppressed academic complaints.
Victor didn't just borrow Marcus's work or ask to be a co-author. He ruthlessly, systematically stole it.
He took Marcus's groundbreaking algorithms and scrubbed Marcus's name from the documentation.
He published the research entirely under his own name and claimed all the international prestige, the funding, and the awards for himself.
And it gets worse.
Oh, it gets so much worse. When Marcus realized what had happened and tried to speak up, tried to appeal to the university ethics board.
Victor didn't just brush him off. He weaponized his immense power, his reputation, and his influence to utterly crush the young man.
He manufactured false data, didn't he?
Yes, he framed Marcus for academic fraud. He ensured the young prodigy was permanently blacklisted from the entire global scientific community.
He didn't just steal his work. He maintained his monopoly by completely destroying his students' life and credibility.
Which is just a staggering abuse of power.
And the devastating catalyst for all of this, the tragedy that sets this entire impossible locked room revenge plot in motion, happens 3 years ago.
Marcus, completely disgraced, stripped of his life's work, and alienated from the scientific community he loved.
Took his own life.
The fallout of that suicide creates a massive psychological ripple effect of trauma, grief, and cold anger.
A ripple that culminates in the freezing darkness of the observatory dome 3 years later.
Because the police finally run a deep background check on everyone in the room.
And Clara, the loyal, brilliant, ever-present top research assistant who was sitting just a few feet away when Victor's brain boiled.
Clara is not just a random assistant who worked her way up.
Clara was Marcus's fiancée.
We need to pause and seriously analyze the psychological fortitude required for Clara's long con.
It is unbelievable. We are talking about a woman who watched the love of her life be systematically destroyed.
Humiliated and driven to suicide by a predatory mentor.
And instead of lashing out in immediate anger, instead of going to the press or seeking a quick, violent revenge,
She weaponized her grief. She buried it deep.
she changed her name, altered her background, and applied for a job directly with the man who killed her fiancé.
She spent 3 grueling, agonizing years acting as his loyal assistant.
3 years of smiling at him every morning, bringing him coffee, anticipating his needs.
Managing his schedule, and gaining his absolute, unquestioning trust.
The cognitive dissonance required to maintain that facade without breaking is staggering. Like, how do you even do that?
You embed yourself into his daily life, becoming indispensable, all while quietly, meticulously studying the telescope's architecture.
She learned the security protocols, she found the backdoor access points, and she began to write the code.
She essentially lived a dual existence, the perfect assistant by day, the architect of his demise by night.
It is a literal symphony of revenge. 3 years of standing next to the man who ruined her life, just waiting for the perfect celestial alignment.
Waiting for a moment so important that Victor would demand to be sitting in that specific chair at that specific time.
While the heavy alpine storms rolled in to isolate the mountain, she engineered the perfect excuse to get him exactly where she needed him.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to the themes of justice and retribution, Clara didn't just assassinate Victor.
She didn't just shoot him in the parking lot or poison his coffee.
No, she engineered a highly poetic execution. She used his own stolen ambition against him.
The very code he stole from Marcus, the code that built his legacy, his wealth, and his fame, was the exact mechanism she used to physically burn him from the inside out.
It is a profound, almost literary form of retribution. She turned his stolen life's work into his executioner.
It's terrifying, honestly. But you almost have to marvel at the dark, patient genius of it, the perfect, untraceable, silent retribution.
And this is where the narrative of the source material shifts radically.
Yeah, this part freaks me out. It shifts from a solved past tense crime into something entirely different, something active.
Because the case files don't end with Clara's arrest.
No, they don't. The police cybercrime unit discovered something else. While they were tearing apart the observatory servers, analyzing the hacked calibration code, they found a final piece of malicious scripting.
Clara didn't just write a murder script. She wrote a contingency plan.
A dead man's switch.
The forensic cyber investigation uncovered what we call a sleeper script, embedded deep within the observatory's external data transmission network.
What exactly is a sleeper script?
In cybersecurity, a sleeper script is a piece of code that lies completely dormant. It avoids detection by antivirus protocols, just waiting for a highly specific set of parameters to wake it up.
And the trigger for this specific code is what elevates this from a localized murder case to a much broader digital threat.
Because according to the recovered code strings we have, the script was programmed to upload itself to the global cloud the exact moment Victor's pulse stopped.
He wore a biometric smartwatch that fed health data to his phone. The moment that watch registered a 0 heart rate, the sleeper code woke up.
It bypassed the observatory's firewalls and went live on the internet.
And the parameters of this code are highly sophisticated and deeply aggressive.
It essentially operates as a digital contagion, or a zero-day exploit. Once in the wild, it actively scours the internet.
It is constantly searching for any active digital stream, any audio broadcast, any video broadcast, any deep dive that is discussing the Zenith Observatory case in detail.
It is a piece of code hunting for its own story.
It's listening for keywords: Zenith, Victor Sterling, solar furnace, concave mirrors, Clara, Marcus.
It's listening to the metadata of streams right now.
And here's the truly terrifying part. The police cyber report details exactly what the code is designed to do when it finds a stream discussing these keywords.
It doesn't just crash the server.
No. It uses a zero-day exploit to gain backdoor access to the physical hardware of anyone tuned into that specific broadcast. It hijacks the device itself.
It turns on the device camera without triggering the indicator light, and it begins to analyze the ambient light levels in your room.
It acts exactly like the telescope's calibration software, but on a micro scale. It maps the physical environment of the listener.
It gauges the distance from the screen to the user's face.
It maps the geometry of the room. And then the code forces the display hardware, the screen you were looking at right now, to override its factory safety limiters.
It pushes the LED and OLED backlights to maximum unfiltered capacity.
It attempts to focus the ambient light of the screen into a blinding flash. So if your screen is getting brighter right now, you need to blink and look away. Do not look at the center.
Now, obviously, a smartphone or a laptop screen does not possess the wattage or the concave optics to boil a human brain like a stadium halogen light.
Right, it's not going to kill you.
But the conceptual architecture of the attack remains the same. By overriding the hardware limiters, a screen can be forced to emit a sudden, highly concentrated spike of blue light and brightness,
Which can cause severe optical damage, flash blindness, or trigger photosensitive seizures.
It forces a physical real-world reaction from a purely digital threat.
Which brings us exactly to the core of what makes this case so incredibly haunting. It's not just about what happened to Victor on that mountain.
It's about the vulnerability of the systems we interact with every single day.
Let's synthesize what we've unpacked today from this massive stack of sources. We started with the tragedy of Marcus.
A brilliant, vulnerable mind erased by a predator in a system that rewards ruthlessness.
We watched the cold, calculated, terrifying patience of Clara, who spent years turning her profound grief into a weapon of absolute precision.
And we witnessed the dark genius of turning an everyday environment lights, mirrors, code into an untraceable, impossible murder weapon.
And the ultimate takeaway here connects directly to you, the listener, and your everyday life.
Because we live in a world entirely mediated by connected devices. We are surrounded by sensors, cameras, screens, and automated systems.
We sit in front of massive monitors for work. We hold glass screens inches from our faces before we go to sleep.
And we do it with complete, implicit trust that the code running them is benign. We assume the architecture of our digital lives is safe.
We assume the hardware limiters will always hold. We assume the mirrors are just reflecting starlight.
We assume the screen is just showing us a deep dive into an old case file.
But this story proves that trust is incredibly fragile. The hardware is just hardware. It is completely agnostic.
It is the intent of the unseen code running beneath the surface that defines whether a machine is a tool for connection or a trap.
Which leaves us with a chilling question to consider long after this deep dive ends.
If a physical, multi-million-dollar machine in an isolated observatory can be maliciously repurposed to execute a man without leaving a trace, what happens when an autonomous script like Marcus's learns to adapt its revenge?
What happens when malicious code evolves beyond targeting the specific people who wronged its creator and starts turning the very screens we use to casually consume information into the next weapon?
It's definitely something to think about the next time you look at your phone in the dark.
Keep questioning the systems you trust, keep digging into the impossible, and we will see you on the next deep dive.